Hey Reddit, I'm Ethan, 32. I never thought I'd see the day where I'd tell my own mother to get off my property. But when she tried to push my kids out of her house, the house I was paying for, I finally saw her for who she really was. And trust me, she regretted it. For years, I had been supporting my mother financially, paying her mortgage, covering bills, helping her live comfortably, all because I thought she's my mom. She took care of me. Now, it's my turn to take care of her. But what I didn't realize was that she saw it differently. She didn't see me as a son helping his mother. She saw me as a walking bank account. And the moment she thought I wasn't useful anymore, she tried to throw me and my kids away. It all started when I hit a rough patch. A temporary rough patch. Nothing major. I had a good job, good savings. But after some unexpected expenses, I figured, why not stay with mom for a bit until I got everything back in order? She had a big house, plenty of space. And besides, I had been paying for it for years. I thought it was a no-brainer. But apparently, my mom had other ideas. The day I moved in with my kids, mom was all smiles. Oh, of course, honey. You and the kids can stay as long as you need. She welcomed us in, helped unpack, acted like she was happy to have us there. But after the first week, that smile started to fade. It started with little comments. Nothing direct, just passive-aggressive little digs. Oh wow, I forgot how much space kids take up. I didn't realize how noisy it gets with children in the house. I hope they don't mess on my furniture. At first, I brushed it off. Thought, okay, maybe she's just adjusting to having us here. But then, it got worse. Way worse. One night, I caught her rearranging the furniture in the living room, moving my kids' stuff out of sight, like she was hiding the fact that we lived there. When I asked her about it, she laughed it off. Oh, I just like things neat, honey. No big deal. But it was a big deal. And the next thing she did made it crystal clear that she wanted us gone. It was late. My kids were asleep. I was in the kitchen cleaning up. And then, mom walked in. She hesitated at the door. Then, she whispered, Ethan, there isn't enough space for your kids here. I froze. Turned around. What? She sighed. You know what I mean, honey. It's just, the house isn't really suited for children. Maybe it's time to start looking for your own place. I stared at her. Disbelief, anger, confusion. I had been paying for this house for years. And now, the second I needed something in return, she was acting like I was some burden. I clenched my jaw. You're telling me to leave? She gave me this fake, sweet smile. Not immediately, but, sooner rather than later. I just think it would be better for everyone. Better for everyone? Or better for her? Because suddenly, I wasn't just her generous son. I was an inconvenience. And that was my final straw. I set my glass down, looked her dead in the eyes, and I said, I'm no longer paying your mortgage. Her face dropped. The color drained. She blinked, like she hadn't just heard me correctly. Ethan, what? I crossed my arms. You want me out of the house I've been paying for? Fine, but you'll be paying for it now. Her mouth opened, closed. Then, she laughed nervously. Oh, honey, don't be ridiculous. I shrugged. Not ridiculous. Just fair. If I'm such a burden, you don't need my money anymore, right? She panicked. Her eyes darted around, like she was trying to find a way to undo what she just said. Ethan, sweetheart, that's not what I meant. I grabbed my coat, walked past her. I'm moving out in 2 days. And then, I left her standing there, stunned, shaking, because for the first time ever, she wasn't the one in control. I was. The next 2 days were quiet. No arguments. No fake apologies. Just tense silence as I packed up. And then, the moment my kids and I walked out the door, I heard her pick up the phone, and I knew exactly what she was doing. Calling the bank, calling her lenders, trying to figure out how she was going to afford the house without me. Because the truth was, she couldn't. She had gotten too comfortable living off of me. And now, she was screwed. A week passed, then another. I ignored her calls, ignored the messages. Then, one evening, as I was coming home from work, I saw her, standing outside my house, tears in her eyes, looking defeated. And I knew she had finally hit rock bottom. I took a deep breath, walked past her, unlocked my door, and just before I stepped inside, she whispered, Ethan, please. I paused, turned around, looked at the woman who had put herself in this position. The woman who had tossed me aside like I was nothing. And for a split second, I almost felt bad. But then, I remembered how she never cared until she needed something. And I made my choice. I met her eyes, shook my head, and said, "You didn't have space for my kids. I don't have space for you." Then, I shut the door. For good. And as I locked it behind me, I felt free. Because this time, she was the one left outside. If someone only values you when you're useful to them, they don't value you at all. And the second you stop being their ATM, they'll show you exactly who they really are. And trust me, that's when you walk away. Because nothing feels better than letting entitled people deal with the consequences of their own actions. And in the end, she got exactly what she deserved. After I shut the door in her face, I stood there for a few seconds, listening. I could hear her breathing heavily on the other side. She didn't knock, didn't call my name, just stood there, probably trying to process what just happened. I expected her to keep knocking, keep begging. But after about a minute, she just left. I watched through the peephole as she slowly walked down my driveway, got into her car, and drove away. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for turning her away. I felt relieved. But of course, that wasn't the end of it. The next morning, my phone blew up. Calls, texts, even an email. All from my mom. "Mom, Ethan, I know you're upset. Let's talk, please." "Mom, I didn't mean what I said. You misunderstood me." "Mom, please, I need to see you. This is serious." I roll my eyes. Serious? Serious for who? She sure didn't think it was serious when she was whispering at my door, trying to kick my kids and me out of a house I paid for. I ignored every single message. Blocked her number. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. 3 days later, my neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, knocked on my door. She was an older lady, sweet, always baking cookies for my kids. When I opened the door, she looked concerned. "Ethan, honey, I don't mean to intrude, but your mother was parked outside your house last night. She was just sitting there in her car for hours. I almost called the police." I sighed. Of course she was. Mrs. Callahan hesitated. "I don't know what's going on between you two, but are you okay?" I gave her a small smile. "I'm fine. Just family drama." She nodded, patted my arm, and said, "Good. Just want to check. If you need anything, you know where I am." I thanked her, closed the door, and felt my stomach twist. My mom was watching my house. Why? What was she waiting for? I found out that night. Around 10 p.m., I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone when I heard knocking. Not frantic, just soft, hesitant. I already knew who it was. I debated ignoring it. But after a minute, I sighed and got up. When I opened the door, there she was, looking exhausted, wearing the same clothes she had on the last time I saw her. Eyes red like she'd been crying. I didn't say anything, just stared at her. She swallowed hard. "Ethan, please, I just want to talk." I leaned against the doorframe. "About what?" She exhaled. "I know I hurt you. I know I should have handled things differently." I raised an eyebrow. Should have handled what differently? Be specific. She looked down at her hands. "I should have never made you feel unwelcome. I should have appreciated what you did for me. But Ethan, honey, I didn't think you'd actually leave me like this." There it was. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry for the consequences. I crossed my arms. "So, what exactly do you want?" She hesitated. And then, she dropped the act. "Ethan, I can't pay the mortgage. The bank is going to take the house." I sighed, rubbing my face. "You don't have savings? A backup plan?" Her lips pressed together. "You know I don't. I never thought you'd abandon me." That word, abandon, it made my blood boil. "Abandon you?" I repeated. "You abandoned me the second you decided my kids and I were a burden. You abandoned me when you tried to kick me out of a house I was paying for. The difference is, you just didn't think you'd ever need me. And now, you do." She looked like she wanted to argue, but I wasn't done. "I told you the second I walked out that I wasn't paying your mortgage anymore. That wasn't a bluff. You made it clear that I wasn't welcome. So now, you're not my problem." Her mouth opened and closed, like she was trying to find the right words, but there weren't any left. Then, she did something that almost made me laugh. She got angry. "You are so cold, Ethan. I'm your mother." I chuckled. "Yeah, and I was your son. That didn't seem to matter much when you wanted me gone." She let out a shaky breath. "So that's it? You're just gonna let me lose everything? I stared at her. Did you care when I had nowhere to go? She didn't answer, and that was answer enough. I stepped back. Good luck, Mom. I hope you figure something out. Her eyes widened. Ethan, I closed the door in her face. And this time, I didn't feel a single ounce of regret. Because I had warned her. She just never thought I'd actually mean it. And trust me, she still hadn't learned her lesson. Because what she did next was so unbelievably selfish, manipulative, and desperate that I realized she would never change. And when I found out, I made sure it was the biggest mistake of her life. After I shut the door on her, I expected her to keep trying. Maybe more calls, more texts, maybe even more surprise visits. But for the next few days, nothing. Silence. At first, I thought maybe she had finally given up, that she had finally accepted that I wasn't going to save her this time. But deep down, I knew my mother wasn't the type to back down. And I was right, because the next thing she did proved she wasn't just desperate. She was dangerous. It started with a call from my bank. A routine fraud alert. Mr. Carter, we noticed some unusual activity on your account. A large withdrawal attempt flagged as suspicious. Did you authorize this transaction? I frowned, pulling up my banking app. No, I didn't. The woman on the phone hesitated. Okay, well, the transaction was declined, but someone attempted to withdraw $5,000 from one of your accounts at a branch location near your mother's address. My stomach dropped. Near my mother's address? I already knew. Still, I had to ask. Was it an older woman? Blonde? Mid-50s? A pause. Then, I'm not at liberty to share personal details, sir. But if you did not authorize this transaction, I'd recommend filing a fraud report immediately. I clenched my jaw. Yeah, do it. Then, I hung up and sat there because I couldn't believe what I had just heard. My mother tried to steal from me. I should have seen it coming. The moment I told her I wasn't paying her mortgage anymore, I should have known she'd try something like this. But for some reason, a small part of me still believed she had a little bit of dignity left. That small part of me was dead wrong. She wasn't just begging. She wasn't just playing the guilt card. She was actively trying to take what wasn't hers. And that was my last straw. I got in my car and drove straight to her house. Not her house, actually. The house I had been paying for. The house she was about to lose because she got too comfortable using me as an ATM. I didn't bother knocking, just walked right in. She was sitting at the dining table, scrolling through her phone like she didn't have a single care in the world. When she saw me, she smiled. Ethan, I was just about to call you. I slammed the door behind me. Oh, really? To apologize for trying to steal from me? Her smile faltered. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone. My bank called me. Said someone tried to withdraw $5,000 from my account at a branch near here. And you want to guess who I think it was? She scoffed. Ethan, that's ridiculous. Why would I? Cut the crap, Mom. I snapped. I know it was you. She blinked. For a second, I saw a flicker of guilt. Then, it disappeared. She sighed, shaking her head. You're being dramatic. Dramatic? I laughed. You tried to steal from me. Her jaw tightened. I wasn't stealing. I just needed help. I let out a slow breath, staring at her. You could have asked. But instead, you went behind my back, tried to take my money without my permission, and now you're acting like I'm the bad guy for being mad about it. She exhaled sharply, crossing her arms. Well, what was I supposed to do, Ethan? You left me with nothing. I'm losing my house. I have bills. That's not my problem. I cut in. Her eyes widened. How can you say that? I'm your mother. And I was your son when you tried to kick me and my kids out of here. I shot back. Silence. For once, she didn't have a response. Because she knew I was right. She just never thought I'd actually hold her accountable. I took a deep breath. Here's what's going to happen. First, you're going to call the bank and tell them you made a mistake. You're going to make sure nothing comes back on me. And if you don't, I pulled out my phone. I'll report you for fraud. Her face paled. Ethan. No, Mom. You don't get to play the victim here. She clenched her jaw. I just needed help. You needed me when you thought I was useful. I said, my voice calm but firm. But the second you thought I wasn't, you threw me away. And now, you expect me to save you. Her lip trembled. You'd really let me lose everything? I tilted my head. Did you care when you tried to take everything from me? Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't feel a thing. because I knew those weren't real tears. Those were the tears of someone who got caught, not someone who was sorry. And that was exactly why I didn't fall for it. She sniffled. What do you want me to do? I leaned in, figured out, just like I had to. Then I turned around and walked out for the last time. I don't know what happened next. Maybe she called the bank. Maybe she didn't. But I didn't care anymore. Because for the first time in my life, I was completely free. No guilt, no obligation, no more being treated like a human wallet. Just peace. And trust me, I wasn't going to let her take that from me too. I blocked her number, ignored her emails, cut her off completely. And as far as I was concerned, that was the end. But the thing about entitled people, they don't just give up. And when she realized I was really, truly done, she did something so insane, so desperate, so unbelievably selfish that it made me wonder, had she ever even loved me at all? Because what she did next was the final nail in the coffin. And after that, there was no coming back. Not for her. Not ever. After I walked out my mother's house that day, I thought that was it. I had given her a final chance, and she blew it. She tried to steal from me, refused to take responsibility, and when I didn't cave, she played the victim. I had cut her off completely, blocked her number, ignored her emails, and told my neighbors to call the cops if she ever showed up at my house again. I was done, but she wasn't. A week passed with silence, then another, and just when I started to believe she had finally accepted her fate, I got a call from my uncle. Ethan, I need to talk to you about your mother. I sighed, rubbing my temples. I don't think we have anything to talk about. She's losing the house, he said, and I think she's in real trouble. I almost laughed. Real trouble? She had put herself in this situation. She had treated me like a disposable wallet, thrown me aside when she thought I wasn't useful, and now she was paying the price. That's not my problem, I said. My uncle hesitated. I get that. I do. But, Ethan, she's not handling it well. She's been calling everyone in the family, asking for money. Nobody is giving her anything. And now, she's talking about selling your dad's stuff. Everything he left behind. My stomach twisted. Dad, my father had passed away when I was in my early 20s. He was the only parent who had ever really supported me. He believed in me, even when nobody else did. And even after he was gone, I held on to his things. The old watch he wore every day, his books, his tools. Most of it was with me. But some things were still at Mom's house. And now, she was trying to sell them off like they were nothing. I clenched my jaw. She wouldn't dare. She's desperate, Ethan. She'll do anything. I hung up the phone, and for the first time since I walked away, I felt pure, unfiltered rage. I told myself I didn't care what happened to her, that she was just dealing with the consequences of her own actions. But selling off Dad's things? That was different. That was personal. So I got in my car, and I drove back to her house. For the last time, the moment I pulled into the driveway, I knew things had gotten worse. The lawn was overgrown. The front porch had old newspapers stacked on it, and the blinds were drawn tight, like she hadn't let sunlight in for weeks. I knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again, harder. Finally, the door cracked open, and there she was. She looked awful. Her hair was a mess. Her eyes were sunken, and she was wearing an old bathrobe that looked like it hadn't been washed in days. She stared at me. Ethan. I pushed past her and walked inside. The house smelled stale, like she hadn't been cleaning. I scanned the living room. Boxes, piles of junk, and there, on the coffee table, was an old leather case. Dad's case. I picked it up, my hand shaking. Tell me you weren't about to sell this, I said, my voice dangerously low. She crossed her arms. I needed money. I turned to her, my blood boiling. So, you're going to sell Dad's things? The things he left for me. She scoffed. Oh, please. He left them for the family. I took a deep breath. No, Mom. He left them for me. And you know that. She didn't answer, because she knew I was right. But instead of apologizing, instead of showing even a sliver of remorse, she did what she always did. She made herself the victim. This is your fault, she snapped. If you had just helped me, I wouldn't have to do this. I wouldn't be losing my home. I wouldn't be selling anything. You could fix all of this, Ethan. But you won't. I laughed. A dry, bitter laugh. You still don't get it, do you? I said, you think this is about money? This is about how you treated me. How you made it crystal clear that you didn't care about me. You only cared about what I could do for you." She shook her head. "That's not true." "Yes, it is," I interrupted. "And you know it." Silence. She was breathing hard, like she wanted to keep arguing, but something in my eyes must have told her I was done. I picked up Dad's case and turned for the door. "Wait," she said. "You're really going to leave me like this?" I didn't even turn around. "You left me first." And then I walked out. This time, I wasn't just cutting her off. I was erasing her. No more calls. No more second chances. No more guilt. She had made her choice. And now, she had to live with it. I got in my car, drove away, and never looked back. That night, I put my father's things in a safe place. The case, the watch, everything that mattered. Everything that my mother had been willing to sell just to keep her own life comfortable. And as I sat there, staring at it, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. I had spent my whole life chasing my mother's approval, trying to make her proud, trying to earn her love. But I finally realized she was never going to give me that. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because she wasn't capable of it. And now, I didn't need it anymore. I had freedom, and for the first time, that was more than enough. I didn't hear from her after that. At least, not directly. But I heard through my uncle that she lost the house, that she had to move in with a distant relative, someone who barely tolerated her, that she was struggling. And you know what? I didn't feel bad, not even a little, because I wasn't the one who did this to her. She did it to herself, and that was exactly how it should be. But there was still one last twist I never saw coming. Something so unexpected, so karmic that it proved I had made the right choice all along. And trust me, Reddit, it was perfect. After I left my mother's house for the last time, I thought I was done, that I'd never have to deal with her again. I had taken back my father's things, cut her off completely, and walked away without a single regret. She had made her bed. Now she had to lie in it. I thought that was the end of the story. But life had one final twist waiting for her. And when I found out, I almost felt bad. Almost. It happened about 6 months later. By then, I had completely moved on. My job was going great, my kids were happy, and my life was finally peaceful. No toxic family drama. No guilt trips. No one trying to use me. Just freedom. And I had never felt better. Then one evening, my uncle called me out of nowhere. "Hey, Ethan, you're not going to believe this." I sighed. "If this is about Mom, I really don't care." "You might care about this," he said. "She got scammed." I blinked. "What?" He let out a dry laugh. "Yeah, some guy, some financial advisor, promised to help her rebuild her life. Said he'd help her invest what little money she had left so she could get back on her feet." I already knew where this was going. And he took everything. Every last cent, wiped out her account and disappeared. I sat back in my chair, shaking my head. "Jesus Christ." "Yeah," my uncle muttered. "She's got nothing now, Ethan. No house, no money, no friends. She burned every bridge, and now she's drowning." I took a deep breath. "So what do you want me to do about it?" He hesitated. She's asking for you." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Of course she is. She wants to talk," he said. "Wants to make things right." I rolled my eyes. "No, she doesn't. She just wants me to bail her out." Silence. Then quietly, "Yeah, probably." I sighed. "Look, Uncle Mike, I get that you feel bad for her, but I don't. She did this to herself, and I'm not saving her." "I figured," he said. "Just thought I'd let you know." "Thanks," I said, "but I'm done." And I meant it. I hung up, and I didn't look back. A week later, she tried reaching me directly. Through new number. "Mom, Ethan, please. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but I'm your mother. I need you." I stared at the message for a long time. Then, I blocked the number. Just like that. No hesitation. No second thoughts. Because the truth was, she wasn't my mother. Not really. She was just a woman who happened to give birth to me. And nothing more. I don't know what happened to her after that. I never asked. Never checked. Never cared. Maybe she found another way to survive. Maybe she finally learned her lesson. Or maybe she's still out there, trying to find another person to use. Either way, it's not my problem. Because for the first time in my life, I was free. And trust me, nothing felt better than that. If someone only loves you when they need you, they never really loved you at all. And when they finally realize they lost you for good, they'll panic. They'll beg. They'll try to make you feel guilty. But that's when you have to remember, you don't owe them anything. Not your time, not your money, not even your attention. Because walking away, that's not losing. That's winning. And in the end, they'll be the ones left behind. And you'll finally be free. And nothing is more valuable than that.